President, I know the distinguished chairman of the Commerce Committee has just spoken, and we are working very hard on an amendment that would be an infrastructure amendment, and it would be money that we want to spend now, but it will be spent in the future. And I think if we have infrastructure requirements that we know we're going to need in the future and we can push them up for 2 years, that's a policy that all of us can agree to. And that's exactly what the distinguished chairman and I are working on. Senator Rockefeller and I know that modernization of our air traffic control system is certainly something that we would like to be ahead of Mongolia doing. But in addition to that, Mr. Chairman, Mr. President, we want to make sure that we have the efficiencies in the system. Not only will it create jobs in the next 2 years, but it will streamline the system, it will make it more efficient, prices can come down to consumers, and that will also help jumpstart our economy. So I thank the chairman, and I want to talk now about the McCain Amendment. Mr. Chairman, Mr. President, I am so pleased that Senator McCain has come up with an alternative. It will be a substitute for the bill before us. It strikes the balance. It's tax relief and increased government investment in our economy so that we will be able to jumpstart our economy in a fiscally responsible way. The bill before us is not the right approach. I could not possibly support the underlying bill. I do hope that we can come together, though. Just having the debate and hearing what people are saying on the outside, I think has made people realize that when we're talking about $1 trillion, we're not talking in a vacuum. We're talking about $1 trillion on this bill. We're talking about another $1 trillion of deficit this year, not counting the bill that we are discussing today. And the U.S. debt is $10.6 trillion already. We are approaching a tipping point whereby creditors are going to be increasingly unwilling to lend to our government because they are going to be concerned about our ability to pay them back. Much of our debt, 25%, of our U.S. national debt is held by foreigners. The Chinese government in particular owns over $500 billion. We must consider having this much of our debt in foreign hands and whether borrowers will continue to buy our debt. What happens to our economy if they don't? What happens if they do? What would the interest rate be if all of a sudden they decide that it's going to be more risky, interest rates go up? What would inflation do to the economy that we are in right now? If we're going to do this, Mr. President, we must spend every dollar so carefully. We must make sure that every dollar we spend is stimulative. In fact, the bill before us, the underlying bill, 1/3 of it that is supposed to be stimulative is not going to be spent in the next 2 years, meaning we would be spending money down the road to solve a problem that may not even exist down the road, and we will be increasing the size of debt without the stimulative effect. Mr. President, I refer to Alice Rivlin, who was the budget director in President Clinton's White House. She recommended that we split the plan. She said, implement the immediate stimulus now. As she acknowledged, we can talk about the plans which may or may not have value at a later time. It doesn't have to happen right now. The McCain alternative has a better way to stimulate the economy, put money into the economy immediately, and it is a balanced approach. The McCain proposal will lower the 10% bracket to 5% for 1 year, lower the 15% bracket to 10% for 1 year, eliminate the payroll tax for all employees for 1 year. It would lower the corporate tax rate from 35 to 25% for 1 year, recognizing that we have the second highest corporate tax rate in the entire industrialized world. We want to encourage our corporations to hire people in America today. We need to look at the tax cuts and the history that we've had with tax cuts. Every time we have had big tax cuts in a depressed situation, they have stimulated the economy, they have worked. President Kennedy, President Reagan, and President Bush. Assisting Americans in need. The McCain alternative extends unemployment insurance benefits, extensions of unemployment insurance benefits that are tax-free until 12/31/2009, training services for dislocated workers. Certainly, we all will agree that that is important. The McCain alternative goes to the heart of the problem, which is housing. The underlying bill doesn't really address what caused this in the first place, and that is the problem in the housing market. The McCain alternative provides a loan modification program, tax incentives for home purchases of up to $15,000, making the GSE conforming loan limits extended at the higher levels to get more help for people who are struggling to make loans. This is a very important component. And last but not least, the spending part goes to infrastructure. It doesn't have all of the programs in it that the underlying bill does that we will be able to debate in the future. They may be good programs, but they are not going to create jobs. The McCain spending portion is on infrastructure and defense. I'm the ranking member on the Military Construction Committee of Appropriations. We have a 5-year plan for the Department of Defense. They know what they're going to spend and what they're going to need. We've just had a ramp up of troop strength to 90,000 more in our armed services, the Army and the Marines. We have to accommodate them. We have to build the housing. We have to build the training facilities. All of those things are in a 5-year plan that normally we would take 1 year at a time to build out. Why not take the 5-year plan and move it up to 2 years or 3 years? Mr. President, I have an amendment that will do that. But the McCain alternative puts $9 billion into those exact type of military construction projects. That is a very important component because it will be jobs in America. It will be jobs that will benefit Americans. And of course, it will be for the training and care of our military who are out there on the front lines protecting our freedom. What better kind of infrastructure building would we want? And the McCain substitute has transportation infrastructure. We all know that there are shovel-ready transportation projects ready to go all over our country. Bridges, roads, public transit, something I certainly support. Airport infrastructure improvements, and Senator Rockefeller and I are going to try to increase that in amendments later on. But these are the components of the McCain substitute that I hope our colleagues will consider. Mr. President, the tax cuts have had a history, if they are big enough and they can be felt, of stimulating our economy through the worst of times. All through history, they have done this. I hope that we can support the McCain substitute. Or, Mr. President, I will look down the road and I will say, if the McCain substitute is not accepted by the majority of our colleagues here, let's let that be the benchmark from which we will go. I do not think the majority of America believes that what is in the underlying bill is good for the short term, nor is it good for the long term. I cannot even imagine putting so much debt into our system without the underlying stimulative effect that would bring in the revenue to pay for that debt, and thereby perhaps cause a much worse problem in our financial markets than we see today. So I hope that during this debate that we have had this week, that we now will be able to see what the good parts of all of the different plans are. I hope that we can adopt the McCain's substitute. If we don't, I hope it will be one of the components of a bill that will be written that will have the support of many Republicans and many Democrats. It will be the best thing that could happen in our country if this bill passed on a true bipartisan basis. It does not give the confidence to our country to have a plan that is passed just by the Democratic side of the aisle. Yes, Democrats won the election. No one argues with that. But 46% of the people of our country did vote for Republicans. So I think if we have a balance here and America sees that we are working together, I think that would be a good thing for the overall spirit in our country that is searching for bipartisanship. And if we can come to a bill that would have tax cuts for every individual and businesses to be able to hire people, if we can fix the housing market by encouraging people to buy, if we can give spending plans for our infrastructure to the states so that they would be able to hire people for bridges and roads and mass transit. If we can put our money into the Department of Defense, where I know we could spend $75 billion in 3 years instead of 5 years, and know that the jobs would be in America and they would be for Americans. So, Mr. President, I think we have an opportunity here. I hope that we can come to some agreement that we can all be proud would be the best for our country. I thank you, and I yield the floor.